Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us a very special guest, Secretary Ministry of Coal, Mr. Anil Swaroop. He's special because in the last 4 months, he's handled some of the most critical responsibilities for this government. The one being creating a transparent process for auctioning of nearly 204 coal blocks, which the Supreme Court had cancelled as illegal some time ago. And it was indeed very critical for these coal blocks to have been auctioned so that they could go towards producing of power, very critical, a large number of power plants waiting for coal supplies, as also steel and cement capacity, to increase steel and cement capacity in the country. To discuss all that and the intricacies of the entire process of auctioning of the coal blocks, we have with us Mr. Anil Swaroop. Welcome to our program, Mr. Anil Swaroop. You have been lauded by your own minister, who's publicly said that you've worked day and night to create these transparent processes for auctioning of coal, especially coming in the backdrop of so much controversy created in the previous regime, which spilled over the courts going into the whole thing, Supreme Court. So please tell us, how did you go about designing this process? What was your basic thought when you began some 4 months ago?
Actually, I must begin by saying that it's been a teamwork, the leadership being provided by the minister himself, and it's really kind of him to use those words.
But he's been doing that publicly. He's been saying it's all his team. Yeah.
No, it's really a teamwork. Since I do most of the talking, I walk away with all the credit. I think it's the whole team that has worked. The primary thought process related to putting in place a transparent process through which such auctions could happen. And our view was, considering the criticality of what we were doing, it was best to let everyone know what we were doing. And that's where the IT applications that enable us to put in place this transparent process helped us and helped everyone.
Okay. So now you have already auctioned about 29 blocks, which is for the private sector, and you have through a nomination basis or some allocation through a different procedure, you've given some more blocks to the public sector companies. My understanding is that you've already collected a total of 3.2 lakh crores. Now, it's a mind-boggling sum, which eventually will go back to the states over a period of 25 years. Now, have you spoken to the states and other stakeholders, and what is their response to the outcome of some of these things you're doing?
Let me first correct a few numbers. Actually, so far we've auctioned 29 blocks, and we've allocated 38 of them. Okay. We haven't collected that sum that you were mentioning, which is now 3.35 lakh crore.
You will?
It will over a period of...
Over a period of time,
A period of around 30 years. And almost the entire amount will flow to the states. Central government does not retain any amount of that. And that is how it will work. We had initially, when the law was passed by way of ordinance, we had Schedule 2 mines, which were 42 in number. These were such mines where Supreme Court had allowed the previous allottees to continue mining till 31st of March.
Okay.
The challenge was that we had to put in place an alternative mechanism or alternative institution or an individual who could carry on mining after 31st of March. All the urgency that was associated with what we were doing was on account of this fact that we had to put in place someone who could carry on mining. I'm happy to say that in most of the cases we have somebody who will continue mining after 31st of March. And this has happened in case of 29 mines that have been auctioned. Some of these mines, beyond 29, were also allocated to state entities, and this was done through a different process. The state entities will not pay as much as in the auction amount. They will pay a reserve price of 100 rupees in case of what we call the regulated sector, where power is the primary component, and 150 rupees as the floor price will be paid in the non-regulated sector.
Okay. So there's one complaint that I hear from the private sector is that you've given public sector a special deal. There is no level playing between the private sector and the public sector. The public sector companies involved in producing steel and cement are getting coal blocks at much cheaper rates, considerably cheaper than what the auction rates have shown for the private sector. So how do you respond to that?
No, it's a conscious decision of the government not to auction the mines for public sector, because public sector entities are primarily owned by the government. So whatever value that gets created comes back to the government in turn. Whereas when you give it to the private sector, the value gets retained by the private sector. It's a question of where the value resides.
Okay.
If the margins come back to the government, there's no point in creating additional margin, which in any case will come back to the government. So that was the reason why allocations were made in case of state and central public sector undertakings, and auctions were done for private sector.
So for public sector, you had a fixed price,
Yeah.
and for the private sector, there were auctions.
It was market driven, yes.
Yeah. Now, I'll come to the power sector, because the steel and cement sector have had no controversies. In fact, your auction process has been perfect. It went off very smooth. Now, for the power sector, coal blocks which were auctioned for power, there have been some misgivings which have arisen on account of your reverse auction process, which by itself was perfectly all right, but some private companies have gone to court because their allotments were cancelled. Now, could you explain what happened in those?
See, as the case is in the court, I would not like to comment on it. In a democracy, if anyone has any issue with what the government is doing, they are free to go to the court, and we'll abide by the decision of the court. So I'll leave it at that. But let me explain to you the reverse auction process, because it's important to understand that the idea of reverse auction was to ensure that the tariffs don't go up.
Yeah.
If we have had a normal auction, then the increase in price of coal would have translated into increase in tariffs for power.
Yeah, which you didn't want to happen.
That's why
steel and cement, it's perfectly all right.
Absolutely, because
the price is market determined,
yes,
the end
absolutely,
price.
Absolutely.
Whereas in the case of coal for power, power is not market determined, it's a regulated price.
It's regulated. So that's why we call it regulated sector and the other unregulated sector. So here what happens is, tariff has a major component in terms of the coal with the fuel component.
Okay.
And when you determine a tariff, there is a charge that is determined through the price of coal. Now, for example, if the tariff is say 3 rupees per unit and the coal component is 700 rupees therein, so we fix that as the ceiling price and ask them to reverse bid. So every 100 rupees that they come down, they have to reduce the tariff by 6 pice.
Okay.
So they keep reducing it, the tariff keeps coming down. That's how we've tried to, or we have attempted to ensure that this auction process does not lead to escalation of tariff, actually leads to reduction in tariff.
So tell me, roughly at what tariff will the consumer get electricity at the end of the day?
No, it will be very difficult for me to say, because each segment or each PPA is determined differently. What we are saying is, if a tariff is determined in a particular PPA, and it was determined on the basis of a particular price of coal, through a reverse bidding process, that tariff will not go up, in fact it will come down, whatever that tariff is. Because the original determination of tariff is not through what we are doing now. It would have been determined earlier through a bidding process where someone would have bid a particular tariff. So we didn't do that. But what we are saying is, whatever was the tariff at that point in time, if they're going to use this coal, the tariff will actually come down.
But we can safely assume that the final price of the regulated price of electricity will come down substantially
Yes.
from present levels?
Yes, yes. Actually,
That's easier to guess, right?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the ballpark figure is for every 100 rupees reduction in price per ton, the tariff will come down by 6 pice. So if 700 rupees was the cost and the bidding was 400, or whatever that bidding was, this 300 will multiply and then give you an 18 pice reduction in the tariff.
Okay. So from an end consumer point of view, I read somewhere that roughly power today, average, if you take a weighted average of various states, power today costs about between 5 and 6 rupees a unit, if I'm not mistaken, roughly. I mean,
It varies so much that you can't really say, because it varies from initial consumption. Like in Delhi, the initial consumption is cheaper than it as you consume
but
more.
Can we generally sort of say that all future power produced with these coal auction through reverse auction process,
The tariff should come down.
tariff should come down?
Tariff should
say
come down.
under rupees 3 a unit or something like that?
No, I don't know. As I said, it's difficult for me to say how much.
You wouldn't want to wager it?
You don't have to wager. Actually, it will be actually determined by the regulator. That this was the original price of coal, this is where it stands, and that gets passed on to the consumer. That's how it will happen.
And tell me, now coming back to the coal blocks that you cancelled, which were won through reverse auction, did you do it because you found a big variation in the bids that were received for similar blocks?
See, again, as I said, since the whole case is in the court, I would not like to elaborate on that. Suffices to say that we had good reasons to reject them because we found
You
that
suspected there could have been some cartelization?
No, no, no. We have never stated that there was cartelization. What we have said is that the price that was bid was low in comparison to similar blocks, so we did not get a fair value. That's the contention of the government. And on that basis, we did not accept that bid. But beyond it, I would suggest let the court take a call and we'll go by
And it's still lying with the High Court?
It is in the High Court, yes.
And would it be reasonable to assume that if you lose in the High Court, you would...
I would not like to hazard a guess. We'll cross the bridge when we come to it.
Okay. Mr. Swaroop, now coming back to the reverse auction process, you have tried your very best to put in place a very transparent mechanism. Now, experience tells us that the Indian corporate sector, sometimes they do act together. They're very clever in the way they move. In an industry where there are just about 4 or 5 players, how do you avoid, with the best of processes and systems, how do you avoid some amount of, I wouldn't say cartelization, but working in concert?
You know, the advantage of having a transparent process is whatever happens gets to be known to everyone. And again, in a democracy, it gets to be discussed. And the people who come up with their opinions on what is going on, that helps us understand whether a particular bid has been a rational bid, has been a bid that should have come, and that on the basis of that we take decisions.
Okay.
So the advantage of, I mean, some people have asked me that since you had a transparent process, you should not question it. It's the other way around. In fact, transparency enables us to look at the process, not the process itself, but what has happened as a consequence of that process.
So you're saying that it is because of
Absolutely.
your transparent process that you could make out the difference between
Absolutely.
some bids as opposed to the others?
Yes, absolutely. We could identify the outliers very clearly.
Okay.
Because we could see a trend and we could see a particular bid going outside that trend. Okay. This was possible only in a transparent process. Had the process been opaque, we wouldn't have had any option but to accept whatever came our way. So that's the reason and that's the advantage of being transparent.
Okay. Now, coming back to the legislation itself, the 2 big legislations, laws that this government has passed, again in regard to coal as well as the other
Mines.
steel and
Yeah.
other mines. Now, how do you see these 2 legislations helping policy as well as processes?
You know, as far as the coal mines legislation is concerned, it was already there by way of an ordinance and we were doing our work. What the legislation has done is that all the actions that we were taking would have come to a grinding halt on the 5th of April when the ordinance would have lapsed.
Okay.
Now that we have the legislation, we can continue with those activities, and I'd like to inform you that the 3rd tranche of auction will happen from 3rd week of April. So we're looking at another 16 blocks that will be put to auction from 16th of April. So as far as coal mines legislation is concerned, we are continuing with the activity which we had started in the context of ordinance. We'll continue to auction and allot thereafter. In case of mines, this is the legislation which will enable them to carry on first. They can also think in terms of similar auction, for which that's what the legislation provides for. And the legislation also allows for automatic renewal of some of the lease in the past. So both these legislations are clearly very landmark legislations because both of them provide a framework within which such auctions can happen, which is so very different from how they happened a few years ago, and again in the same transparent manner.
Okay. Now, the remaining blocks that you're talking about for coal, I'm saying, are they for power or are they for steel and cement, or are they a combination of these 3?
Of the 16 blocks that are going for auction or likely to go for auction, 11 are for power and 5 are for non-power sector, non-regulated sector.
So you'll be resorting to the same reverse auction method?
Power would be reverse auction.
For power?
Yes.
Okay.
And forward auction for the rest of it. Yes.
And in light of your earlier experience, which has resulted in now a court battle. Will you think of sort of honing the process a little?
No, I don't. I don't think there was anything wrong with the process. I will stick to that
No,
process.
there's nothing wrong. But
I'll tell you why.
Do you think you do with some sort
No,
of
not really. See,
honing
look,
so that this kind of variation doesn't
of the
come?
33 blocks that were auctioned, only 4 are in the court. So by and large, the auction has gone off very well. And we are very sure that the process, there's nothing wrong with the process per se. If there are still some outliers emerging, we'll have to tackle those outliers. I don't think we could make a rule for an exception.
Yeah.
No, exception should be handled the way they have to be handled. You cannot change the rule for the sake of exception. Because by and large, the auction went off very well. And the processes have been very profound. They've been appreciated by everybody.
Yeah, that is true.
We'll continue with that.
One is conceding that at the outset, that overall, I think the processes have been appreciated by everybody. Do you think there could be one small flaw in the policy itself which could result in people acting in concert? And that flaw, which some analysts have pointed out, is that your policy allows coal, especially in coal for power, for bidders to subsequently swap their quota of coal. Like A could buy with from B after 2 years. So will that result in a situation where A and B have some understanding and A withdraws from a contest and B quotes a low price? Is that possible?
No, I don't think so that's possible. Swapping has been facilitated to help economize on transportation cost. And it is not that it will be allowed blindly.
Okay.
Each swapping proposition will be examined.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. It will be examined very closely.
No one can take it for granted that swapping will come through. But if this provision was not there in law, then it would not have been allowed at all. So it enables you to allow swapping, but it can't be done blindly. Each application of swapping will be considered. And at that point in time, we can actually look into whether swapping is for the purpose of helping the economy or economizing on transportation costs, or swapping is just to pass value from one to the
essentially
other.
what you're saying that you'll be monitoring the swapping also at a later stage.
No, in fact, it is not automatic.
It's not
Swapping
automatic.
is not automatic. On the basis of application, it will be examined, and then on merits, a particular swapping will be allowed.
Now, your auction processes and your transparency in the way coal is being auctioned is fine. What about the other piece of reform in your ministry, which is Coal India Limited? Now, where is Coal India Limited headed from here? Of course, you're providing them competition from others because your legislation also says that private mining could begin in future, right? So that's big competition for Coal India. And your target is that Coal India should nearly double its production by 2020. I think it produces about 500 million tons today annually, and you wanted to go up to 1 billion tons. Now, have you thought of some bigger framework of reforms for Coal India?
You know, let me first mention here that this year coal production has been record. It is growing at the rate of 7.2%, which is the highest in past few years. Because Coal India has normally grown at 2 to 3%. This year it has grown. And as I talk to you today, there's not a single power plant which is short of coal, which is pleasantly unusual. That's how it is. So Coal India is already emerging from
today you're saying that coal supply and demand from power plants
is
matching
in the sense that whatever they want, it's there.
And this has not been matching for at least 3 years, 4 years?
For quite some time. Apart from that, I'd like to tell you that this 1 billion target is not a target. Yeah. It is from bottoms. You know, every mine, there is a detailed plan has been worked out in terms of what it takes to take a mine from level X to level Y, which includes evacuation, which includes environment, forest clearance, which includes land acquisition. So the very detailed plan has been worked out. And we are already at it to ensure that the ramping up that we are talking of from 500 million to 1 billion actually happens. And initial results are quite visible. So there is a lot of commitment in Coal India to ramp up its production. See, we are looking at an overall requirement of 1.5 billion tons by 2020. Yeah. So we believe that 1 billion ton will come from Coal India and 500 million ton will come to the private or non-Coal India sector, which is these blocks that we are auctioning. So we're looking at 500 million tons from these blocks and 1 billion ton from Coal India, which will meet the requirement of this country by 2020.
Okay. And another problem which experts have pointed out, not only in regard to Coal India, but also in regard to other miners, private miners of coal for power or whatever, is that wage costs, we may be underestimating the wage cost. In fact, recently a former Coal India head wrote a piece in the Indian Express saying that there is a suppressed, the wages of coal workers is likely to go up twice, 2.5 times the next 1 or 2 years, because it's been suppressed so far. There's been no increase in wages. Do you think that will affect the working of Coal India or the costing of coal in the future?
You know, I don't think we should look at margins by suppressing wages. I mean, that's my personal view. We should not look at margins by suppressing wages. Our margins should emerge as a consequence of efficiency, of technology improvement. That's where our value should be added.
So you're saying that if wages go up,
so be it.
It may not matter.
I mean, ultimately, who benefits by increase of wages? The worker. After all, he is as much a part of the whole process as anybody else. So wages have to legitimately grow up. They should go up.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that wages should be suppressed. I'm saying that wages they seem to be suppressed so far.
You know, the cost reduction.
It will show up later.
Yeah, no, the cost reduction should come by way of improvement in technology and efficiency rather than suppression of wages. That's the point that I'm trying to.
Okay, so Coal India will go the technology route.
What we are trying to suggest is that by improving efficiencies, the value generation is much more. Some of it can be passed on wages to the wage worker, and that should be done.
Okay. And have you discussed this with the trade unions and all that?
We are in touch with all the stakeholders, whether trade unions.
That there will be a big boost to technology and their jobs will be protected, and some of those.
No, I don't think anyone. Coal India has not shunted out anybody. There's no retrenchment happening. What we are saying is, if you improve the capacities and capabilities of those that are working through better tools, through better technology, the efficiency improves, the value generation improves, and everyone shares in that value.
Okay. Mr. Swaroop, in regard to mining of non-coal minerals, there's one criticism that, unlike in coal, where all the blocks, pending blocks were auctioned, probably because Supreme Court had cancelled them. In the case of mining, many blocks where some in principle approval were given have actually not been put up for auction. Would you agree with that?
I think
with that criticism?
No, I think we're looking at into future. Yeah. And in future, it's very clear. There will be no first come, first serve. It will all be put on auction. Yeah. Whether it's coal or whether it's non-coal, it's very clear that we are going to, in both these segments, we are going to have a transparent mechanism of auction.
Finally, the states are going to gain big time from these auctions, and you have given a figure of 7 lakh crore which the states will get over a period of 30 years. Now, I've also seen other figures being quoted, 10 lakh crore. The minister said it could go up to 15 lakh crore. What is the realistic estimate?
You see, I am not too concerned about the actual amount. I am more concerned about the processes. And we have demonstrated that if the process is okay, then it could be any amount. In fact, no one imagined that we are going to have a value of 3.35 lakh crores flowing out of these 67 blocks.
Yeah.
We didn't put a number then, and we are still not putting any number anywhere. Our belief is that if you have a transparent process and you have a market-driven process where the prices are determined through the market, then the correct value will come. What that value will be, only time will tell.
And you're hopeful that the states will use this money, coal-bearing and other mineral-bearing states, they put it to good use when they get this amount?
I have no reason to doubt that. I think they are democratically elected government, very committed to the welfare of their people, and I'm sure they're going to use it for the best of the people.
Because based on the 7 lakh crore figure that you estimated, my calculation shows that each state will get about 2,000 odd crores every year, which is a big sum considering the budgets.
No, it's a substantial amount to the state governments, and I'm sure they're going to use it for the best.
And finally, you're totally convinced that it won't lead to increase in costs to the consumer, whether in steel, cement, or whether in power?
No, this issue has been raised by some people, that by auctioning this, you are raising the cost of the ultimate product. The point is, the price of the ultimate product in a market-driven system will be determined by demand and supply.
Okay, yeah. So
what is happening here is that the margins that were being taken away by the private sector in terms of having cheap inputs, by some way or the other, those margins are now going
to the government and the consumer.
Because ultimately the price is going to be determined by the supply and demand.
Okay. So the government and the consumer are taking away some of the margin the private sector is getting so far.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for talking to us, Mr. Anil Swaroop. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.